John chapter 11 is about the death of Lazarus. A man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, a village of Mary, and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 days. And then after 2 days, he said, um, let's go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." So I'm not quite sure what kind of riddle this is. His disciples said they tried to stone you, and he says we're not going to stumble. Um, so that's an interesting idea. Why would the this question be given this answer? Um, and what I'm thinking right now is a question as basically, why did the Jews there try to stone you? Why did they try to stone you? Because they were walking in darkness. They were walking at night, and they were stumbling. And it almost makes it sound as though Jesus is saying they had justification to try to stone them, because we will go down right now, and they won't. They will walk during the daytime and they won't stumble. So that is just maybe a little bit of conjecture, but I'm otherwise troubled at the idea, how is this a good answer to this question? Because walking and not stumbling, literally, has very little to do with whether someone will try to stone you. But stumbling morally and ethically and legally might, on the other hand, be a reason that the Pharisees would try to stone you. So after he said, "We won't stumble," he said, "Our friend Lazarus," he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples said, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." But Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So it's interesting. He heard that um, Lazarus was sick, and then he says, "I'm going to stay here for 2 more days." And then after 2 days, he doesn't hear any more information, I don't think. He just announces that he's dead. When he first got the message that the one he loved was sick, he said, "This sickness will not end in death." He waited around for 2 days. He didn't receive any more information, but at the end of the 2 days, he said, "He's dead." Then he says, "For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to them." So what makes that makes you wonder, if everybody had been there when he died, what exactly would have made them not believe? Would it have been that Lazarus was so sick or was basically sick and dying, and there was nothing Jesus could have done to stop him from dying? Or was it that they're pulling off some kind of trick, and so uh, if his disciples had been there to see how they were doing the trick, then they would not believe? That question of, I, for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe, that is definitely quite a mystery, because it's not a situation where he's talking to people that he's not um, talking to people that need convincing. He's talking to his disciples who have already stayed with him through thick and thin. Sometimes when I have a question about a verse, it's helpful to go to the Greek. It says, "And I rejoice for the sake of you, in order that you might believe that not I was there." Okay, here's what's going on. Lazarus is dead, and Barabbas is glad that they were not there when it happened, because otherwise they might believe that Barabbas killed Lazarus. So Barabbas says, "I rejoice for sake of you, in order that you might believe that not I was there, but let us go to him." So let's say if I had been there when he died, just what would you believe? So I'm glad I was not there when he died, so that you might believe what? I'm not a murderer? But Thomas, doubting Thomas, was not so sure. He didn't necessarily believe that Jesus had nothing to do with this, that Barabbas had nothing to do with this. So Thomas said, um, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Because this is a little bit of a threat in the Greek. "I rejoice for the sake of you, in order that you might believe not I was there." I rejoice that you're not witnesses to the crime. There we go. I'm happy for your sake that you didn't see nothing. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days, and Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Where were they? They were in the place where John had been baptizing. They got this message from Bethany, waited 2 days. Um, the implications are, based on what he just said about 12 hours, that he spent 1 day walking back. That is just an implication, though. He says there are 12 hours in the daytime. So he's saying, let's walk in the daytime and not spend any time dawdling during the night. So 1 day there. So he got the message, waited for 2 days, but this guy's been entombed for 4 days. Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now that suggests that they wrote the letter saying he is sick after he had already been entombed. But I would need to research that a little bit more, because this 1 day is not 100% known. We look at the place where John had been baptizing and see if that distance could be covered in 1 day. Because if it could, it's like, okay, get the letter, 2 days wait, one-day walk, find him entombed for 4 days. Oh, and we better also have one day for the letter to be delivered. So that's just perfect. He's entombed. Letter goes to Jesus. 2 days there, one day back. He's been entombed for 4 days. Now, Lazarus and Martha and Mary were pretty wealthy, I think. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. Mary stayed at home. So here's Mary staying home, and here's Martha saying, "If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now, I know, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." And Barabbas says to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha says, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Barabbas says, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" And she says, "Yes, I believe you are the Messiah, Son of God, who is to come into the world." Now that was Martha. Martha comes back in to talk to Mary, and after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. She says, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha met him. When the Jews had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached this spot, she said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. So you notice the little switcheroo they've done there. These people were all weeping for Lazarus, and none of them were actually were stating like their faith in Barabbas. So to Mary, he's pretty upfront. He says, "Where have you laid him?" When Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews had also come along weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see." "Come and see," they replied. And Jesus wept. And some of, they say, "See how he loved him." But they also, some of them question, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" And they don't realize that this man did not open the eyes of a blind man. He mixed some dirt with some spit, made some mud and rubbed it in the man's eyes, and told him to wash his eyes in the scent. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been in there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?" By the way, this sentence is in the form of a conditional. It starts with a if, there's an antecedent and a consequent. The contrapositive of this statement is, if you don't see the glory of God, then you don't believe. So we will be analyzing the truth of that statement, or the the direct statement and the contrapositive here. But anyway, they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, They took away the stone. Then Jesus looked at them and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. Okay, so the benefit of the people standing here, this kind of leaves out the reader, because the reader is not actually standing there with them. And when he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, Take off the grave clothes and let him go. And I'm taking a little bit of artistic license here, but I think the next sound that the dead man made was thump when they let him go. So, 45, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. What does it mean to believe in Barabbas? Well, one thing to note is that if I have read this right, that guy's got a very sick sense of humor, very dark. Also, he's kind of having a little fun with the whole resurrection idea. He's making fun of it. But what really ought to be noted is that that stunt, even if Lazarus stayed dead and they just pulled his stinking corpse out of the cave and dropped him on the ground after what Jesus said, that actually might cause some to believe in him. On the other hand, let's come back to this statement. If you believe, you will see the glory of God. I was doing the contrapositive of that. If you don't see the glory of God, then you don't believe. That's the direction that I was going with this. What I saw was Barabbas is pulling this corpse out of there, and basically he makes the corpse like thump onto the ground. So, and since I don't see the glory of God, I also don't believe Barabbas is the Messiah exactly. Again, I think he's kind of the scapegoat. However, if you do believe that this guy was the Messiah, and you believe that he raised people, he just decided randomly that this one guy, Lazarus, is the guy that he's going to raise from the dead, then there you go. You don't read this the same. You actually see him getting up, standing up, and talking to people and saying, oh, thank goodness, I'm back alive again. However, if you actually look into it, does Lazarus ever actually say anything? In John 12, it is mentioned that Lazarus is among those reclining at a table with Jesus. That does not necessarily mean that Lazarus is alive. It could just mean that his dead body is lying there. Also mentioned in John 12:9, there is a crowd of Jews found out Jesus was there and came not only because of him, but to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. 12:10 says the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus. That suggests that's the trouble. You can't kill somebody that is already dead, I don't think. Anyway, it's clear that they took counsel that they might kill Lazarus, but perhaps they didn't know that he was already dead. But one thing they don't say that Lazarus is walking around. They don't say that Lazarus ever said anything. Um, they just say that people want to see Lazarus. Um, and seeing Lazarus might be just seeing a corpse. Uh, and raising from the dead might just mean pulling that corpse out of the tomb. So here, when Jesus says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that you may believe you sent me. Two different interpretations. He knows for a fact that he's going to raise a dead body out of the tomb. And all the people there are going to know that uh, when he speaks to his Father is not God. And in fact, his Father is nothing supernatural at all. But on the other hand, if the body that he pulled out of that grave was alive, walking around, talking, chatting, whatever, um, then the Father that he speaks to is a supernatural being. And the people standing there realize that Jesus is son of a supernatural being. I'm kind of the opinion that the people standing there would find out that definitely Barabbas is talking to his father, who, I mean, is praying to his father in a way, but also that his father was not a supernatural being. But if you know that somebody um, somebody did not come from some supernatural being as their through their heritage, that in no way conflicts with believing in him. You can believe in someone even if you know you understand that they are not supernatural.